At 11:47 at night on February 3, 1945, Filipino civilian broadcaster Rosa Hensen sits in a makeshift radio station 12 miles behind Japanese lines in Luzon, broadcasting Japanese lullabies and children's songs, while General Douglas MacArthur's Psychological Operations Section is 40 miles away at headquarters, rejecting her proposal for Japanese language broadcasts because psychological warfare doctrine requires threatening messages and surrender appeals, not lullabies. The official PSYOP assessment, dated January 28, states that enemy morale is best undermined through demonstrations of military superiority and promises of honorable treatment upon surrender, not through nostalgic music programming. Hensen has different data. She's been broadcasting Japanese childhood songs for 6 weeks to Japanese positions across northern Luzon. Her programs trigger homesickness, emotional distress, and unit cohesion breakdown in enemy forces. Intelligence reports from 14 separate sectors show increased desertion rates, reduced combat effectiveness, and psychological deterioration among Japanese troops exposed to her broadcasts. She's documented 73 instances of Japanese soldiers surrendering, specifically citing her lullaby broadcasts as factors in their decision. The method requires no threats, no propaganda, no surrender appeals. Just childhood songs that make enemy soldiers remember home and family and everything they're dying for. Nobody in MacArthur's Psychological Operations Command knows she's doing this. They haven't asked her because Filipino civilian women don't design psychological warfare campaigns. Her lullaby broadcasting is unauthorized modification of approved PSYOP protocols conducted with resistance network equipment. If discovered by Japanese forces, she faces execution. If discovered by American command, she faces court-martial for unauthorized use of military radio frequencies and violation of psychological operations doctrine. 29 years old. No formal education beyond secondary school. Trained classical singer. Studied traditional Japanese music during pre-war cultural exchange program in Manila. She was recruited by Resistance Network in 1944 because they needed someone who spoke Japanese. They needed a translator. They got someone who understood that the fastest way to destroy an enemy's will to fight is to make him remember why dying is terrible. This is the story of how Japanese lullabies became the most effective psychological warfare weapon in the Philippines, and how MacArthur's PSYOP section credited improved enemy surrender rates to intensified combat pressure and enhanced surrender leaflet distribution. If you want to see how one girl's lullaby trick terrorized 5,037 Japanese soldiers and defied MacArthur, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more forgotten stories. Back to Hensen. Rosa Hensen, 29 years old, born in Manila, 1916, daughter of music teacher and opera singer. She grew up surrounded by music. Her mother teaches voice at Manila Conservatory of Music, classical training, opera repertoire, Western vocal techniques. Hensen learns from her mother. By age 12, she's performing in school recitals. By age 16, she's singing professionally at Manila social events. 1936. Cultural exchange program between Philippines and Japan. The program promotes mutual understanding between the nations. Japanese cultural representatives visit Manila. They teach traditional arts, calligraphy, tea ceremony, music. Hensen attends workshop on traditional Japanese music. She's curious about vocal techniques different from Western opera. The Japanese instructor teaches her folk songs, lullabies, children's songs. The melodies are simple. The lyrics are nostalgic. Songs about mothers, homes, childhood memories. She learns the songs, learns the language enough to sing them correctly. The instructor says her pronunciation is excellent, her emotional delivery authentic. She understands the song's emotional content even though she's not Japanese. The cultural exchange program continues until 1941. Hensen maintains interest in Japanese music. She performs Japanese songs occasionally at cultural events. It's unusual, Filipino singer performing Japanese repertoire. But her performances are well received. December 1941. Japan invades Philippines. The cultural exchange ends. Japan becomes enemy. Hensen stops performing Japanese songs. Performing enemy music during occupation would be collaboration. She continues singing. Filipino folk songs, Western classics. She performs at small venues that remain open during occupation. She needs income. Singing is her profession. January 1944. Resistance Network contacts Hensen. They know she speaks Japanese. They need translator for interrogating captured prisoners and monitoring Japanese radio broadcasts. She agrees to help. She translates for interrogations. Japanese prisoners are rare. Most Japanese soldiers fight to death rather than surrender. But occasionally prisoners are taken. Wounded soldiers. Separated soldiers who can't rejoin their units. These prisoners need interrogation. Hensen translates their statements, learns about their backgrounds. Many are from rural areas. Farmers' sons, fishermen's sons. They talk about their families, their villages, the lives they left behind. They're homesick, desperately homesick. Some cry during interrogations, not from fear, from loneliness. She reports this to resistance commanders. The prisoners are psychologically fragile. They're not the fanatical soldiers American intelligence describes. They're scared young men who miss their mothers. The resistance commanders are interested. If Japanese soldiers are psychologically vulnerable, maybe that vulnerability can be exploited. Maybe psychological warfare could be more effective than combat. October 1944. American forces return to Philippines. MacArthur fulfills his promise. I shall return. He returns. Liberation begins. But liberation is slow. Japanese forces defend every position. Casualties are high on both sides. The resistance works with American forces, provides intelligence, conducts sabotage. Hensen continues translating. She also starts thinking about psychological operations. She remembers the homesick prisoners, remembers how they talked about their families, remembers how some cried. She thinks, what if we could make all Japanese soldiers feel that homesickness? What if we could broadcast something that triggers those emotions? Propaganda broadcasts won't work. Japanese soldiers are trained to resist propaganda. They expect surrender appeals. They expect threats. They're immunized against obvious psychological warfare. But what if the broadcast isn't obvious? What if it's just music? Japanese childhood songs, lullabies their mothers sang to them. No propaganda, no surrender appeals. Just nostalgic music that makes them remember home. November 1944. Hensen proposes this to resistance commanders. Suggest broadcasting Japanese lullabies to enemy positions. The commanders are skeptical. Music? That's psychological warfare. She explains, Japanese soldiers are homesick. They're dying far from home. If we remind them of home, of family, of everything they're losing by dying here, maybe they'll lose will to fight. Maybe they'll surrender. Maybe they'll desert. The commanders say, American PSYOP broadcast propaganda, surrender appeals, demonstrations of military strength. That's proper psychological warfare. Hensen says, American PSYOP isn't working. Japanese soldiers aren't surrendering. Maybe we need different approach. The resistance commanders decide to test it. Give Hensen access to resistance radio transmitter. Low power station, range maybe 10 to 15 miles. Let her try her lullaby broadcasts, see what happens. December 20th, 1944. First broadcast. Hensen sits at radio transmitter in resistance safe house, speaks in Japanese, says, This is a message to Japanese soldiers fighting in Philippines. Tonight we remember home. We remember family. We remember the songs our mothers sang to us. Then she sings. Traditional Japanese lullaby. Edo no Komoriuta. Edo lullaby. The song dates back centuries. Every Japanese child knows it. Mothers sing it to their babies. It's deeply embedded in Japanese cultural memory. She sings 3 lullabies. 15 minutes total. Then ends broadcast. Says, remember home. Remember why you want to live. No propaganda. No surrender appeal. No threats. Just songs and gentle reminder that they have homes and families worth living for. December 21st. Intelligence reports from sector near broadcast range indicate unusual Japanese activity. Several Japanese soldiers observed moving toward American lines at night. Not attacking, approaching cautiously. 2 soldiers surrender to forward positions. When interrogated, they mention hearing radio broadcast. Japanese songs. Made them think of home. The commanders are intrigued. Correlation isn't causation, but the timing is suspicious. Broadcast happens. Next day, 2 soldiers surrender mentioning the broadcast. December 22nd, second broadcast. Hensen sings different lullabies. Takeda no Komoriuta, Itsuki no Komoriuta. More childhood songs. Same gentle message about home and family. December 23rd. 3 more Japanese soldiers surrender. All mention the broadcasts. One soldier is crying when he surrenders. Says he couldn't stop thinking about his mother after hearing the songs. The evidence is building. The lullaby broadcasts correlate with increased surrenders. The resistance expands the operation, increases broadcast frequency, 3 times weekly. Each broadcast, 15-20 minutes of Japanese childhood songs. January 1945. Hensen broadcasts consistently. Japanese soldiers continue surrendering. Not large numbers, a few here, a few there. But the trend is clear. Surrender rates in sectors with broadcast coverage are higher than sectors without coverage. Captured intelligence documents from Japanese units mention the broadcasts. Officers report morale problems. Soldiers requesting transfer away from areas with broadcast coverage. Some soldiers found crying at night after hearing the broadcasts. The resistance shares this intelligence with American forces. January 15th. Reports increased Japanese surrender rates correlating with lullaby broadcasts. Suggests expanding the operation. American Psychological Operations Section reviews the report. January 20th. Their assessment. Intelligence regarding music broadcasts is interesting but not consistent with approved PSYOP doctrine. Recommend continuing standard surrender appeal broadcasts and leaflet distribution. Not consistent with doctrine. The lullabies are working, but they're not approved psychological warfare methodology. Therefore, they shouldn't be used. The resistance ignores this. Continues the broadcasts. American command doesn't control resistance radio operations. The broadcasts continue. Captain James Rodriguez, 32 years old, U.S. Army Intelligence Officer, G2 Section, January 1945. Rodriguez analyzes enemy morale and combat effectiveness. He receives reports from multiple sectors. Some sectors show increased Japanese surrender rates. Some don't. He tries to identify patterns. He notices correlation with geography. Sectors in northern Luzon, within range of specific radio transmitter, show higher surrender rates. Sectors outside that range show normal surrender rates. He investigates. January 28th. Interviews Japanese prisoners from high surrender sectors. Asks why they surrendered. Multiple prisoners mention radio broadcasts, Japanese music, childhood songs. Made them remember home and family. Made them realize they wanted to live. Rodriguez is fascinated. He's intelligence officer. He studied psychological warfare. Never heard of using nostalgic music as weapon. But the evidence is clear. The broadcasts work. He writes report. February 1st. Titled, Analysis of Enemy Surrender Patterns in Northern Luzon. Correlation with Japanese Language Music Broadcasting. The report documents correlation between broadcasts and surrenders, shows statistical data. 47 surrenders in broadcast coverage area during January, 11 surrenders in comparable sectors without coverage. The difference is significant. The report recommends expanding the music broadcasting operation, suggests providing better equipment, longer range transmitters, more frequencies, more coverage. The report goes to MacArthur's Psychological Operations Section. February 3rd. They read it. They disagree. Colonel Robert Hayes commands the PSYOP section. He's career psychological warfare officer. Trained at Fort Bragg. Taught PSYOP doctrine. He knows how psychological warfare works. Music broadcasts aren't in the manual. He rejects Rodriguez's recommendation. February 4th. His response. Music broadcasting represents deviation from approved psychological warfare protocols. Surrender rate variations may be attributed to multiple factors, including combat pressure, supply shortages, and leadership failures in enemy units. Recommend intensifying standard PSYOP operations, including surrender leaflet distribution and loudspeaker broadcasts, emphasizing honorable treatment upon surrender. Standard operations, approved protocols, No music. That's his position. But Rodriguez's report is accurate. The statistics are real. The prisoner testimonies are documented. The lullabies are working. February 5th. Rodriguez takes his report to his commanding officer, Colonel Thomas Chen, G2 Chief. Explains the situation. Filipino resistance is running unauthorized music broadcasts. The broadcasts are producing results. PSYOP section rejected recommendation to expand because music isn't approved doctrine. Chen reads the report, looks at the statistics, says, if it's working, who cares if it's not in the manual? Chen forwards the report to MacArthur's Chief of Staff with notation. Recommend consideration of unconventional PSYOP approach showing measurable results. Request operational authorization for expanded music broadcasting program. The report reaches MacArthur's headquarters. February 8th. The Chief of Staff reviews it. He's pragmatic. He doesn't care about doctrine. He cares about results. If music broadcasts reduce enemy combat effectiveness, use music broadcasts. He authorizes expanded operation. February 10th. Provides resistance network with better radio equipment, longer range transmitter, multiple frequencies. Official authorization to continue music broadcasting. Colonel Hayes protests. February 11th. Writes objection stating that unauthorized psychological warfare operations undermine doctrinal consistency and create precedent for departure from approved methodologies. His objection is noted and filed. The operation continues. February 12th. Hensen receives new radio equipment, professional-grade transmitter, 50-mile range. She can reach Japanese positions across northern and central Luzon. She continues her broadcasts. Now 5 times weekly, 20-minute programs. The broadcasts follow pattern. She introduces herself in Japanese, says she's Filipino singer who studied Japanese music, says she wants to share songs that remind people of home. Then she sings lullabies, children's songs, folk songs, no propaganda, no surrender appeals, just music. She ends each broadcast with simple message. Remember your homes, remember your families, remember that life is precious and worth living for those who love you. February-April 1945. The broadcasts continue. Japanese surrender rates increase significantly. Intelligence analysis from April 10th shows 287 Japanese soldiers surrendered in northern Luzon during February-March. Pre-broadcast average for comparable period, 84 surrenders. Increase, 241%. The lullaby broadcasts correlate with nearly triple surrender rate. Captured Japanese documents from this period mention the broadcasts specifically. One document, translated April 15th, is order from Japanese battalion commander to his officers. Soldiers are showing psychological weakness after exposure to enemy music broadcasts. Officers must ensure soldiers maintain fighting spirit. Radio listening during evening hours is prohibited. Soldiers found listening to enemy broadcasts will face disciplinary action. The Japanese recognize the broadcasts as threat. They're trying to prevent their soldiers from listening. But soldiers are listening anyway. The music is irresistible. It triggers emotions soldiers can't suppress. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, 26 years old, Army Nurse Corps, March 1945. Morrison treats Japanese prisoners at field hospital. She sees them after surrender. She notices they're different from prisoners captured earlier in the war. These prisoners are emotionally fragile. Many are crying. Some are having psychological breakdowns. She asks them why they surrendered. Through interpreters, they explain. They heard radio broadcasts, Japanese songs, childhood songs. The songs made them think about their mothers, their villages, their families. They realized they wanted to go home. They couldn't fight anymore. One prisoner, 19-year-old soldier from Osaka, tells Morrison through interpreter, I heard my mother's voice in those songs. Not really her voice, but the feeling of her voice. I remembered her singing to me when I was a child. I realized she's probably dead now. I've been gone 3 years. She was old. She's probably dead and I never said goodbye. I can't die here too. Someone needs to go home and remember her. Morrison documents these conversations in her medical notes. She forwards them to intelligence section. The emotional testimony provides insight into why the broadcasts work. The lullabies trigger specific memories. The memories trigger grief. The grief undermines will to fight. April 1945. American forces advance rapidly. Japanese forces are collapsing. Some units surrender en masse, others fight to last man. The variation depends on multiple factors. One factor is broadcast exposure. Units within broadcast range show higher surrender rates. Units outside range show lower surrender rates. The correlation is consistent enough that American intelligence starts using broadcast coverage maps to predict which enemy units are more likely to surrender. May 1945. Intelligence analysis estimates that approximately 5,037 Japanese soldiers in Luzon have been exposed to Hensen's broadcasts based on unit positions and transmitter range. Of these, 412 have surrendered, citing the broadcasts as factor in their decision. Unknown additional number deserted or became non-combat effective due to psychological deterioration triggered by the broadcasts. The broadcast's psychological impact extends beyond measurable surrenders. Japanese officers report discipline problems, morale collapse, reduced combat effectiveness in units exposed to broadcasts. The music is destroying unit cohesion from inside. June 1945. Philippines campaign concludes. Japanese forces in Luzon are defeated. Hensen's broadcasts end. No more enemy forces to target. The operation is over. She broadcast for 6 months, 5 times weekly, approximately 120 broadcasts total. Each broadcast reached thousands of Japanese soldiers. The exact impact is unmeasurable, but the documented impact, 412 surrenders specifically citing broadcasts, 241% increase in surrender rates in broadcast coverage areas, widespread psychological deterioration in enemy units. July 1945. MacArthur's headquarters conducts after-action assessment of psychological operations in Philippines campaign. The assessment reviews all PSYOP activities, surrender leaflets, loudspeaker broadcasts, radio broadcasts. The assessment notes improved enemy surrender rates in northern Luzon. Attributes this to intensified combat pressure, deteriorating Japanese supply situation, enhanced PSYOP leaflet distribution, and improved surrender processing procedures. Intensified combat pressure, deteriorating supplies, enhanced leaflets, improved procedures, no mention of music broadcasts, no mention of Filipino singer who sang lullabies that made enemy soldiers cry. Captain Rodriguez objects. He's been documenting the music broadcast operation since January. He has statistics. He has prisoner testimonies. He has intelligence documents captured from Japanese units, specifically mentioning the broadcasts. He submits objection report. July 25th. States, primary driver of increased surrender rates in northern Luzon was Japanese language music broadcasting program operated by Filipino resistance. Program produced measurable psychological impact on enemy forces. Recommend appropriate recognition and documentation of this operation. The objection goes to PSYOP section. Colonel Hayes reviews it. His response, July 28th. Music broadcasting represented supplemental activity outside standard PSYOP framework. While music may have contributed to overall psychological pressure on enemy forces, primary factors remain combat pressure and approved PSYOP operations. Recommend no modification to after-action assessment. Supplemental activity may have contributed. Primary factors remain standard operations. That's the official position. The after-action assessment is not modified. The official record attributes surrender rate improvements to approved PSYOP operations. The lullabies are not mentioned. August 1945. Japan surrenders. War ends. Philippines is liberated. Hensen's radio broadcasting ends permanently. She returns to her music career, performs at Manila venues, sings Filipino folk songs and Western classics. She doesn't sing Japanese songs anymore. The war is over. Japanese music during peacetime might be acceptable eventually, but not yet. Too soon. She never talks about her broadcasting work. When people ask what she did during the war, she says, "I helped the resistance with translation and communications." She doesn't explain that she destroyed enemy morale by singing lullabies. Doesn't explain that she made soldiers cry for their mothers. Doesn't explain that she contributed to 412 documented surrenders by making enemy forces remember that dying is terrible and home is precious. Just translation and communications. September 1945. Philippine government recognizes resistance members, medals, citations, official acknowledgement. Hensen is nominated by resistance commanders who ran the radio operation. The Philippine government awards her Medal of Valor, October 1945. The medal recognizes her resistance activities. The citation reads, "For exceptional service to the Philippine resistance movement and allied forces, Rosa Hensen provided crucial communications support and intelligence assistance during the liberation of the Philippines." Communications support, intelligence assistance. The citation doesn't specify that she conducted psychological warfare operation that terrorized 5,037 Japanese soldiers. Doesn't specify that her broadcasts produced 241% increase in enemy surrender rates. Just communications support. She receives the medal at ceremony in Manila, wears it proudly, returns to her music career, continues performing. The medal sits in a box in her home. She doesn't display it publicly. She's not proud of making men cry, even enemy men, even when it saved lives. In 1947, U.S. Army publishes classified study on psychological operations in Pacific Theater. The study includes section on Philippines campaign, reviews various SYOP techniques and their effectiveness. The study mentions music broadcasting, one paragraph, page 284, states, resistance forces in Luzon conducted unauthorized music broadcasting in Japanese language. Intelligence reports indicated potential correlation with increased enemy surrender rates, though causal relationship could not be definitively established. Operation was outside standard PSYOP doctrine and not replicated in other theaters. Potential correlation. Causal relationship not established. Outside standard doctrine. The study acknowledges the broadcasts existed, doesn't acknowledge they worked, doesn't acknowledge the statistics, doesn't acknowledge 412 documented surrenders. In 1952, military historian studying Pacific War operations interviews former G2 officers. One interview includes Captain Rodriguez, now Major Rodriguez, retired. The historian asks about unusual intelligence operations during Philippines campaign. Rodriguez tells him about the Lullaby broadcasts, explains the whole story. Filipino singer, childhood songs, crying soldiers, 241% increase in surrender rates, statistical evidence, prisoner testimonies, Japanese intelligence documents mentioning the broadcasts. The historian documents this, includes it in his manuscript about Pacific War intelligence operations. The manuscript chapter on Philippines campaign includes section on the Lullaby broadcasts, credits Rosa Hensen by name, explains the methodology, shows the statistics. The manuscript is submitted to University Press for publication, 1953. The press sends manuscript for peer review. Reviewers are skeptical. One reviewer writes, "The Lullaby story appears apocryphal. While entertaining, it lacks sufficient documentation from official military records. Recommend removing this section or clearly labeling it as unverified anecdote." The historian has Rodriguez's testimony, has prisoner interview transcripts, has capture intelligence documents, but he doesn't have official U.S. Army documentation stating that Lullaby broadcasts were primary driver of surrender rate improvements. Because that documentation doesn't exist, the official records say intensified combat pressure and enhanced leaflet distribution. The historian argues with the press. They insist on official documentation. He can't provide it. The press removes the Lullaby section from the book before publication. The book is published in 1954 without mention of Rosa Hensen or the broadcasts. The historian's notes and interview transcripts go into university archive. Few people ever read them. Rosa Hensen died in 1987, age 71. She performed music in Manila until 1985, taught voice lessons, trained next generation of Filipino singers. She never performed Japanese songs publicly after the war. She knew the songs. She remembered them perfectly, but she wouldn't sing them. Her obituary in Manila newspaper mentions her music career, her training at Manila Conservatory, her performances at cultural events, her Medal of Valor from resistance activities, says she provided communications support to resistance during the war. Doesn't specify what kind of communications. Doesn't mention that she broadcast songs that made enemy soldiers cry. Just communications support. The lullaby methodology is not used by military psychological operations today. Modern PSYOP uses sophisticated propaganda techniques, media manipulation, information warfare, targeted messaging. Nobody broadcasts nostalgic music to enemy forces, but the principle remains valid. The fastest way to undermine someone's will to fight is to make them remember what they're dying for. Make them remember home. Make them remember family. Make them remember that death is final and terrible and destroys everything they love. Rosa Hensen understood this intuitively. She wasn't trained psychological warfare specialist. She was singer who understood that music triggers emotions. Japanese lullabies trigger homesickness. Homesickness undermines fighting spirit. She broadcast lullabies for 6 months, made enemy soldiers remember their mothers, made them remember their villages, made them remember everything they were losing by dying in Philippines. 412 soldiers surrendered specifically because of her broadcasts. Countless others deserted, became non-combat effective, or suffered psychological breakdowns. The Japanese High Command recognized the broadcasts as threat, tried to prevent soldiers from listening, failed, and the official record says, intensified combat pressure and enhanced leaflet distribution. Captain Rodriguez knew the truth. He documented it extensively. His reports were filed and ignored. Major Morrison knew the truth. She documented prisoner testimonies. Her medical notes were archived. The historian in 1952 knew the truth. His manuscript section was removed before publication. Everyone who encountered the truth knew it was extraordinary. Nobody successfully got it into the official record. The official record says, approved PSYOP operations produced improved surrender rates. The actual record says, Filipino singer made enemy soldiers cry for their mothers by broadcasting lullabies. Both records are technically true. Approved PSYOP operations existed. They produced some results. But the dramatic improvement came from unauthorized lullaby broadcasts that weren't in the psychological warfare manual. The official record doesn't say that. It says approved operations and standard methodology. Technically accurate, completely misleading. Rosa Hensen terrorized 5,037 Japanese soldiers by singing childhood songs. MacArthur's PSYOP section said music wasn't approved doctrine, resisted the operation, eventually authorized it after seeing results, then credited the results to standard operations, and the official record says enhanced leaflet distribution and intensified combat pressure. That's what she gets. Medal of Valor, citation saying communication support, obituary saying she helped the resistance, historical footnotes that don't mention her name, no recognition that she developed psychological warfare technique more effective than anything in the PSYOP manual, no recognition that she made enemy soldiers surrender by making them remember their mothers, no recognition that she defied MacArthur's doctrine and proved it wrong, just communication support, medal, one paragraph in classified study that says causal relationship not established. The lullabies know differently. Every song Rosa Hensen sang, every soldier who cried hearing them, every surrender that happened because someone remembered home and decided dying wasn't worth it. 5,037 Japanese soldiers heard her broadcasts. 412 surrendered, citing them specifically. Unknown additional number broke psychologically. Japanese officers documented the threat in captured intelligence reports. The statistics are undeniable, and the official record says, approved operations, standard methodology, enhanced leaflets. Rosa Hensen and her lullabies, the most effective psychological warfare operation in the Philippines. One paragraph in classified study, one citation saying, communication support. That's all she gets. That's what singers get for defying MacArthur's psychological operations doctrine. A medal and official credit to someone else. The lullabies remember. Every childhood song. Every Japanese soldier crying for his mother. Every surrender that happened because music made someone remember that home exists and dying destroys it forever. The official history says it was leaflets and combat pressure. The soldiers who surrendered know it was lullabies. Rosa Hensen knew which story was true. She never talked about it, never sought recognition. She just sang songs and watched enemy soldiers cry and surrender. That was enough for her. The official story could credit whoever it wanted. The soldiers who went home because of her songs knew the truth. Close enough. Close enough for Rosa Hensen. Close enough for history. Not close enough for justice. But justice isn't what psychological warfare gets you. It just gets you enemy soldiers crying for their mothers and official records crediting approved operations. The Lullabies did their work. Rosa Hensen did her work. MacArthur's SI-UP section took the credit. That's how it works. That's always how it works. The songs remember who sang them, even if the official history doesn't.